Welcome, everyone. I am Rabbi Steve Greenberg, the founding director of Eshel, a support, advocacy, and education organization for LGBTQ Orthodox Jews and their family members. Eshel is very proud to be sponsoring this panel discussion for the Miami Jewish Film Festival on the film Holy Closet, a film produced by Avigail Sperber and directed by Moran Nakar. And while there have been many films over the past 2 decades that depict this contested space of Jewish religion and queer experience, 2 of them stand out. This is one of them. The first is a documentary entitled Trembling Before God by Sandy Dubowski. It was the first film to portray the pathos and passion and pain of Orthodox gay Jews. And for many of us, it was a mirror. It was the first time we were made visible, represented in all our human complexity. However, it didn't sugarcoat the realities at all. The film was dark. The music mixed traditional klezmer sounds with brooding, ominous chords. And since then, there had been a handful of other documentaries and feature films, all similarly brooding and dark and sad until now. Holy Closet is the first portrayal of our lives that isn't dark. This series of mini docs on queer religious life cycle moments is upbeat and sweet and funny, poignant. While not denying the tensions, the film highlights how some of us have rejected the either-or choice and are moving on with our lives as both queer and religious Jews. We are dating, finding partners, getting married, making families, celebrating holidays, milestones in our lives, garnering support of our families and friends, and by doing so, in the words of Orit Avishai on our panel, remaking Orthodoxy in some ways. We are joined today, graciously, by 4 panelists who are in various ways related to this juxtaposition of identities once thought incommensurate. We welcome Daniel Gammerman, Josh Avishur, Linda Sugarman, and Orit Avishai. I'll introduce them individually before they speak. And then afterwards, we'll have a chance to talk with each other about the film and our experiences of comparing the film's Israeli realities to our own here in the US, and particularly in Southern Florida. Daniel Gammerman is originally from Brazil. After coming to the USA to learn in yeshiva, he has developed a long career within the financial industry. He was raised in an Orthodox environment. He's the proud parent of 4 children, has been happily married to a man for 5 years, and he lives here in Southern Florida. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, welcome, and thanks so much for having me here.
Daniel, I just want to begin with just an introduction to our panel. If you might start us off with a little bit about a scene or an interaction or a character you found most interesting or compelling in the film, and what touched you and why. And then after that, I'd like you to share a bit about your own story, how it might be similar or different from these depictions. So what scene or character in the film touched you most?
I think there are a lot of scenes I think that are very relevant for us, and just seeing, let's say, I think day-to-day life, within the context of having the religious and LGBT experience in the same space is amazing. I think for me, I think the scene that I think put it all together like the most was the holiday preparations for Passover, when you have like the grandma and that couple, that one of them is observant and the other one is not, and how they were able to like seamlessly navigate being an LGBT couple, having like a religious grandma preparing for Passover, for Pesach, cleaning out the house for chametz and so forth, and not only doing that, but how even the non-religious, non-observant partner, how he was like helping out the observant partner, and how they were able to even explain this to the children in a way that seemed like so seamless and so harmonious at the same time. That I think over the years now, I think we all of our minds, I guess, who grew up Orthodox, it was like almost like impossible for those things to coexist, at the same space. And here, I felt that this was a situation where everything was coexisting in harmony. Everyone was happy. There was no that impossibility that we were taught that would be there. That even the children, there's no way children could go up in such an environment and have it make sense to them. And here you see a child that seamlessly understands that like this dad, he's observant. This dad is not observant. He's okay with all of that, and that doesn't affect like his own like view of how he practices his religion. So I thought that was like very powerful.
And a little bit, if you don't mind, of your own story, your own navigation. You didn't begin in the U.S. and
No.
your own story, but both Jewish and LGBTQ, and how it interfaces with what you saw.
Of course. I grew up in an Orthodox family, very Orthodox family, like half Litvish, half Chabad in Brazil. And I went to yeshiva like my entire life, like from yeshiva day school, as a young child, all the way to yeshiva high school. Upon graduating from high school, I was sent to yeshiva abroad here to just yeshiva before even doing any college here in the United States. That's when I left Brazil when I was like 16 years old. And then since then, I've been living in the US. I went to yeshiva. Eventually, I graduated. I started a career in the financial market where I still am. In the meantime, of course, I was a prototype, a very good boy, and I did everything that was expected of me. I wasn't like I was a good yeshiva student. I was very into learning. I enjoyed learning, and that was and still is part of my life. So I did everything that I was supposed to do, even getting married. Like even though it was hard for me, like as I went out into shidduchim, was at first a little hard for me to do it, but at the same time, that what was expected for me. And I look back, I didn't fully understand what like being gay was about. I don't think at the time, if you would have asked me like if I was gay, like if that like I would have definitely denied, like like vehemently denied that that's not me, because back in the 90s when all this was happening, I had no information, no access to anything.
Uh-oh. We can't hear you. Daniel, we've lost you. We've lost the sound. Now we see you narrow. You have to go back to the other view. That's
okay.
now we hear you.
Sorry,
again.
guys.
Now we hear you again.
Sorry, something happened here in the connection. So as I was saying, at the time, I don't think I saw myself as gay. I knew something was off about me, but I couldn't really pinpoint, like, what was it all about. So I think I did like what was expected of me. And I did marry a wonderful person, a person that like I appreciate a lot. And I think was a great friend. But at the same time, I don't think like, I had the connection, at a level that a couple, the affection, a connection that a normal couple would have. And it took me years to understand that and come to terms with that. But eventually, after like doing some research and therapy over the years, over many years, I was able to come out, get a clear understanding of who I am. And I went through a process of first coming out to my ex-wife. We had 4 children together. We have 4 children together, and going through a process of coming out to her. Going through a divorce, coming out to each one of my children, and rebuilding a life. Eventually, also, I met my husband, who I've been married for 5 years, and we started an entire new life. There were a lot of changes, like, of course, within the family, obviously, but also a lot of changes within like the community. It was not always easy, of course. It's not an easy process to go through. But at the same time, just living authentically, being able to conciliate both your sexuality, your affection, and your religious life, it's something that's extremely powerful, and I see that reflected in the movie as well. And I look back that like not being able to address all those things, it's a prison that no one deserves, and I cannot imagine also that's what would like God would even expect from us, as human beings.
Thank you so much, Dani. I want to now introduce, if I could, Joshua Avishur. Josh is an Orthodox queer transgender man. He's the parent of 6 children, ranging from 23 to 5. The 4 elder children are by birth, and the 2 younger children are by his partnership with Rafi, who's also a trans man and gave birth to 2 children. Joshua has been involved in Eshel and JQ International, which is a Los Angeles-based organization, as a lay leader and a group facilitator since coming out in 2016. He and Rafi and their 6 kids, as I said, live in Los Angeles. Thank you for being here, Josh.
Thanks, Rabbi Greenberg. The movie was such a joy for me to watch. My mother was Israeli. I have a sister who lives in Israel, and most of my extended family are Israeli. And so the conversations that you could hear on the movie they felt like home. I'd had so many of those conversations. My sister, who lives in Beitar, the Frum de la Frum, we've had the kinds of conversations that Re'ut and her sister Netta had, the really painful, cringy, turns your insides. I had those conversations, and the characters that touched me the most, it's hard to pull them apart because everybody felt like they were having the kinds of life experiences that I've had. A lot of the phrases that were used, like when one of the LGBTQ folk were talking to someone else outside of the group, they would say "Lo akhbat li," right? It doesn't matter who and what other people think. There's a very Israeli sentiment in there that's just so secure in their ability to be true to who they are, and so all of them really touched me very deeply. Of course, the pregnant man, Lee Raz, hit home the hardest, and the first initial response that I had was jealousy, because when I originally came out in the early 90s, there was no such thing as a trans Orthodox person. And so I wanted to have kids. I wanted to live an Orthodox life. I went through conversion therapy and I believed I'd cured myself and lived as a girl. I got married. I had 4 kids. And almost 2 decades later, was able to recognize that wasn't working for me anymore. That what I had put aside and dissociated from was actually still there. And so Lee Raz gets the opportunity to be his whole self and to be a parent. And it's so beautiful. Yeah.
And so, I would think that probably most of our viewers would find it really surprising to imagine that not only are you living a traditional Jewish life, you're living it with a partner and with 6 kids and raising them in an observant context. Could you just talk a little bit about the reality of your experience that probably is much is a rare phenomenon, and it would be really good for us to hear it as a description of a similar frame that was happening in this film, for people to find a way to get on with a more a traditional Jewish life in the context of being fully self-accepting of your gender identity or sexuality.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that you couldn't see from the movie how much interfacing they had with their Orthodox community outside of the family. But for me, my own close relatives love me and accept me as who I am. The Orthodox community that I was in rejected me outright, completely. There are no shuls in the area that I live within 10 miles that I can go to that are Orthodox. I'm not welcome there. And I'm not the kind of person to go into a shul and pretend to be something I'm not, because I know that Orthodox people tend to have issues with gender. So when I want to go to shul, I'm going to talk to that rabbi first. And I've had quite a few rabbis make it clear that I'm not welcome there, or that I have to stand in the back and not talk to anybody and not make friends with anybody, and don't have any interpersonal relationships. That's not so true with one of the shuls in the city. I live in the valley, and the city has a very open modern Orthodox shul, and I'm welcome there, and I love it. But I don't drive on Shabbat, and I don't live anywhere near it. So I'm an Orthodox Jew without a whole lot of community in my immediate geographical surroundings. I have a lot of Orthodox community online. My kids went to Orthodox day schools, and they had a really hard time. When I first transitioned, I wasn't allowed on campus for a number of years. So if I had to pick up my child, I couldn't get out of the car. And some of my kids did not want me to get out of the car because they didn't want any of their classmates to see me. They would get lots of stares, a lot of hatred shoved towards them. Two of them are not religious anymore. They cannot stomach being part of a community that treated us that way. And they don't understand why I'm still religious. But for me, it holds meaning. For me, it's God save me from your followers. I believe that Judaism and Orthodox practice is where I'm supposed to be at, even if the people don't want me there. And my partner, like the partner in the movie, is not religious. And I haven't really seen any other religious Orthodox trans men, you know? And I love my partner, but we live that life where he thinks I'm crazy. You know, the Pesach, he says that, are you going to pass on your crazy Pesach rules onto your children? And my answer is, yeah, I hope so. So like, it's a balance and it's a dance, and it's hard and it's lonely. And when it's good, it's so good.
Right. It was one of the things I think that perhaps we'll speak about a little bit later, is that most of the depictions are outside of organized communal life. That not all of them. The Brit Milah is so beautiful, seems to have some communal orchestration, but most of the portrayals had to do with friendship and family, and more intimate relational circles rather than institutions. And perhaps that's something that we'll speak about later that might relate to the difference between religious life in Israel and religious life in the US. I thank you so much, Josh. We hope to have more opportunity to talk with you at the end. Linda Sugarman grew up in North Miami Beach. She moved away in the early 80s and came back to Miami as a snowbird in 2007. She is a grandmother of 10, one trans grandson and one non-binary grandchild, both of whom live in Hollywood. Her trans grandson recently moved to Linda's Maryland summer home to attend college and to escape the new laws in Florida, which make it very difficult for trans kids. Linda has been an active member of the Eshel community since 2019, and she helps facilitate the Florida Eshel group. She has attended every Eshel parent retreat since 2019, and Linda and her husband are members of the Young Israel of Greater Miami, the first Orthodox synagogue in North Miami Beach, which now has become a very large Orthodox community. Thank you so much, for Linda, for your being here. And again, which of the scenes of the film or individuals or relationships touched you the most? And then a little bit about your own experience, particularly here in Southern Florida.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here. I'm gonna do it a little backwards and first just say a little bit about myself and then talk about the film. So as a member of the ultra-Orthodox community, to say it was a shock to find out about my trans grandson would be a colossal understatement. It made me question my orthodoxy and question my relationship to my grandchild. Immediately, I said, I need a support group, having never participated in one in my life before. And I found Eshel, and it was a lifesaver. So thank you, Rabbi Steve. I learned a lot about the LGBT world that I never knew about, and how no child would choose to be trans because it's such a hard road. Why would anyone want to do that? That really gave me food for thought. At the time that I found out about my grandson, I was kind of his unofficial Uber driver 3 or 4 days a week. At first, I couldn't speak to him about his transition. This went on for months, and I knew it was best not to say anything while I was coming to terms with the situation. Eventually, I felt ready to discuss it, and my grandson was very open and willing to answer any of my questions, which at that point were asked lovingly and not confrontationally. So in the film, I was very interested in Liraz, who transitioned from female to male and was pregnant. My grandson, also female to male, has no interest in giving birth, but it was still interesting to me to see how happy Liraz is in his transition, how he feels comfortable. And I feel my grandson is like that as well. And that makes the acceptance of his trans and transition, it makes it much easier for me. But I related most to the mother of the couple that gets married. It's clear that accepting that her son is gay was a big deal for her. I definitely understood that she can't share her simcha with some of her friends and family. This I can relate to, since not everybody in our family is completely accepting, and certainly not all of our friends. Given the community that I live in, accepting my grandson took a lot of work and time. For me, it was a complete 180. At the first Eshel retreat I attended, at the opening session, they said a statement that really resonated with me. When they come out of the closet, we go into the closet. Boy, was that ever true for me. When I found out about my grandson, I was mortified, nervous, embarrassed, everything. My grandson had just left Beis Yaakov, which is an Orthodox girls' school. Who knew? What did they think? What were they thinking? It was all so scary to me. I just didn't discuss it with anyone. I was closeted. And now here I am exactly 5 years later, willing to be seen and heard. But at our home in Maryland, it's different. Our grandson, who ran away from Florida and the anti-LGBT and anti-trans laws here in Florida, lives with us when we were there, and he lives there when we're not there. He doesn't want us to tell anyone he's trans. To him, he is a boy, maybe a man. He's 20, and he wants to be seen that way, so we don't discuss it with anyone. The film, I liked that it shows people who are still Orthodox, or at least traditional. This gives me so much hope. My grandson, his mother, who's our daughter, and his siblings are basically no longer Orthodox. They observe some things, but not everything, and this is very sad for me. It started before my grandson came out, but that seems to have been the clincher for my daughter. She feels that he will not be accepted, and she will be ostracized from the Orthodox community. I understand that, but it's still difficult. But she's an adult, and she gets to make her own decisions about herself and her children. I also want to say that I love the grandmother in the chumetz scene. That is me, except she was way more patient about the kids having chumetz in the house after she was already cooking for Pesach. I would have had a heart attack. I liked that the film showed people who were willing to buck the system and live their authentic lives, Orthodox and LGBT. It gives me hope that my grandson and his sibling, who's non-binary, who I didn't even mention, will be able to live their authentic lives. I wish it were now some years down the road where there would be more acceptance in the Orthodox community, and maybe they would not have felt the need to leave the community. But even if not for them, then for those who follow.
Wow. Thank you, Linda. It would be good for us to hear a little bit about your own religious struggles and how you manage being this supportive Bobby, this supportive grandmother to your LGBTQ grandkids in the context of a community that probably doesn't understand. Any just words about what your the reality that you face when you go to shul or when you live in community is in regard to this?
So I have to just say that Eshel really, and the support that they offer to parents of LGBT kids, was really major. I also had a talk with a rabbi who I knew through work, who's attended an Eshel conference, but I won't mention his name. I reached out to him knowing that he was an open person and thinking that maybe he would be supportive, maybe he could help me through this a little bit. And his support and understanding of my situation was just so helpful. And then it was just a slow process. It really was. I really just didn't say anything to anybody for a long time. And over time, things change. And over time, I just came to terms with it and decided I don't really care what people think. And I'm going to be what I'm going to be, and I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And that's it. And so I would open up to people slowly, one at a time. And each time that a person is accepting or understanding, it helps. It helps you move to the next person. When people don't just dismiss it outright. So that helps. So other than here and in Eshel, the community, it's not like I have a sign on my door. My daughter does have a sign on her door. I do not have a sign on my door. And that's it. And it is hard in this community. It's a very right-wing community, as people know. In Maryland, which is a much more left-wing community, I could be more open with people, but again, because my grandson wants to be stealth, so I can't say anything to anybody. However, I do want to say to Joshua that we are very fortunate because in Maryland, we have a modern Orthodox shul. The rabbi is a member of Eshel, and even before he was a member of Eshel, he's a very welcoming rabbi. And happy to say that my grandson went there for first night of Rosh Hashanah. He went there for Kol Nidre. He went for Simchas Torah thinking he was going to a barbecue, but he got there a little too early for the barbecue. And the rabbi saw him and said, "Give that boy an aliyah." And they reread the whole thing because they'd already finished, and he got an aliyah. So these things are what make it work out. It just, I knew you'd appreciate that, Joshua. So yeah, I'm sure I'm crying too. And hopefully these kinds of things will become more commonplace, and that people will just accept people and stop putting their judgments on everything. And it's not just the Orthodox community, it's happening in the United States as well. Right. No freedom here anymore. So these things need to change. They need to change the right way.
Thank you so much, Linda. It was really incredibly beautiful and gives us a lot to think about and a lot to hope for. I want just to add that while Linda didn't mention it specifically, the Eshel runs a program for parents of LGBTQ kids. And that conference happens in March of this year. So if you are interested yourself, or you know someone who would be, who is an Orthodox parent of an LGBT child and wants support and camaraderie and friendship, and even it's kind of like now a really big family of kind of mutual support. Please be in touch with us at info@eshelonline.org, or go on our website and you can see that the registration for that retreat is up and running. Thank you very much, Linda. I want to finish with Orit, who for all the personal narratives that are here, my sense is that, Orit, you've heard 100 like them in the process of your research, and so I want to share with our viewers what you've done and how your insights might be able to add to a certain level of academic scrutiny and insight to the personal experiences that people have shared. Orit Avishai is a sociologist at Fordham University in New York, where she affiliated with the Center for Jewish Studies. She has a PhD from the University of California in Berkeley, and she has law degree. I didn't realize you had a law degree. That's quite impressive. From Yale Law School and in Tel Aviv University, and she teaches courses on religion and gender, sexuality, and American politics, and has written extensively about Orthodox Jewish lives. Her book, which I can heartily recommend, is Queer Judaism, LGBTQ Activism, and the Remaking of Jewish Orthodoxy in Israel, which explores many of the themes referenced by Holy Closet and here in our panel, and was published earlier this year. This book by the New York University Press, and is available on Amazon if you want to look it up. The title again is Queer Judaism, LGBTQ Activism, and the Remaking of Jewish Orthodoxy. Thank you so much, Orit, for being here. I'm happy for you to respond to the interactions or scenes or individuals in the film that you found most compelling or touching. But those stories are no doubt fairly familiar to you. So I want to focus as well on what your study adds to this discourse. What did you find most surprising in your study of Orthodox queer Jews? Maybe what did you find most hopeful? Maybe what are the differences between Israel and the American scene that you might be able to at least give us some introductions to? And what are these are a lot of questions, so you can answer any of them in whatever order you like. What are the common strategies that queer Jews in Israel are employing to live with their conflicting identities? And are those strategies, do you think, different or similar to the ones that are used here in the US? So that's a lot to put on you, but I have no doubt that you have even more to say. So thank you so much for being part of this panel. Orit, please.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I just want to say I'm always humbled when I'm invited to be part of these conversations, because, and this was not part of my sort of bio, but I should say this before I delve into the research. I did not grow up Orthodox. I do not identify as LGBTQ. I'm cisgender, have been married to a man for many years. So, and I teach at Fordham University in New York, which is a Catholic Jesuit institution. And those parts of the biography are just as important as my experience studying what we sociologists call lived religion, or the lived experience, what it means to be part of a religious community. In my case, I have been studying and working with Orthodox Jewish communities, mainly in Israel. So Rabbi Steve had asked me a lot of questions, so I'll get to some of them. And if you want to interject and redirect me, please do that. One of the greatest joys, and I'll start with that with this series, is that, and I think that everyone has touched on it, right? That it just displays life in all its almost mundane glory. And Rabbi Steve kind of put the finger on it, right? And in such contrast to trembling before God, which couldn't do it because there was, right, those possibilities for joy, for mendacity, right? For just the everyday life, including the small disagreements, right? And the couples, sort of the young couple trying to figure out, well, how do you hold hands, right? Those are both huge life questions, but also, right, just like everyday interactions. So I think that is one of the greatest achievements of this series, that it captures that in such a joyful, mundane, but also very deliberate, right? It's a very intentional display. So that's one thing that I wanted to respond to. Rabbi Steve asked me about what I found surprising. So during my research, which went on for about 6 or 7 years, I spoke with many people who self-identified as Orthodox, Orthodox adjacent, ex-Orthodox, re-Orthodox, something along that spectrum, people who had mostly grown up in the community and still were affiliated with it, even if they were not, they didn't see themselves as Orthodox, because they had the family, the friends, the neighborhood they grew up in, the yeshiva, right? It's a very small, dense, interrelated community. You can never really leave. So people who identified as Orthodox, Orthodox adjacent, and LGBT, mostly for the purposes of the book, I ended up focusing on gays and lesbians. And one of the most surprising findings was that the way sort of articulated it was like, wow, there are very few people at that point. First, it was 30 who were over 35. Then it became over 40, just because the study took so long, who I really identified or kind of embodied that identity of Orthodox and queer, or Orthodox and gay, or Orthodox and lesbian. And with the younger generation, it was just there. Like, they had the language, they had the vision, they were untroubled by it, precisely because of the, of the Dor Midbar, right? Of the generation that went through the desert right before them. The people who are doing the kind of work that Eshel is doing in the US, the people who are doing it in Israel. So for me, I all the characters in the film kind of seemed familiar, and some I actually knew from my research and meeting them either through interviews or interacting with them in community events. But the young couple, Omri and Daniel, who just had that language at their fingertips, right? And could walk around Jerusalem feeling emboldened, right? And one of them had the tzitzit out, and they had, with the kippah. That would not have happened 20 years ago. So that is sort of one of the surprising sort of moments, was that that this was happening, and the huge change that had taken place. And I did not know this at the time when I started my research in 2016, which was kind of a pivotal moment because of a tragic, violent event during the Jerusalem Pride Parade in 2015, which really forced a reckoning with the already emergent queer, or sort of the LGBT, Orthodox LGBT community and its social activist arms. So what was surprising? A, the huge change in 15 to 20 years. B, that there were people everywhere. So I came to this as, a secular leftist kind, Israeli to the study. And there was always the question, do I go into the West Bank? Do I not go into the West Bank, right? Because of various sort of political decisions. But very quickly, I realized when I did my research, the most interesting people actually lived in the West Bank. Those were the communities that were experienced because of the makeup of these settlements, because of how rapidly people were coming out and insisting on having their local communities accept them, that I would be traveling there and talking to people there, right? Whereas 5-7 years earlier, they would have just moved up to Tel Aviv, maybe to Jerusalem, to some of the more accepting bubbles. They were staying put in these very Orthodox settlements and forcing people to contend with them. What else? Oh, some of the other interesting findings, and I think Rabbi Steve asked me to talk about how, like, what were the strategies that queer Orthodox Jews were employing to live with this sort of so-called conflicting identities. And one of the insights that I emerged was that they were questioning whether, is this a conflict? Does it need to be a conflict? Can we think about being Orthodox, what it means to be a committed Jew in other ways? And to do so, they were all obviously all drawing on human rights discourses and LGBTQ activism elsewhere, but they were also, and sometimes primarily, drawing on their Orthodox education and on Jewish sources, right? So one person, for example, said that being an Orthodox gay man going to a pride parade was his tikkun olam, right? Was his way of repairing the world, to show secular LGBTQ persons who had much contempt for Jewish Orthodoxy, for, in many ways sort of blaming them for holding back a lot of LGBTQ rights in Israel. So showing them that it was possible, and also showing the Orthodox community, right, that LGBTQ people existed amongst them, right? So that was one way. People sought out sort of to make sense of their identities, saying, well, God made me this way. God would not want me to suffer. God would not want to harm me, right? So using what they learned at the yeshiva, what they learned at the midrasha, right? Drawing on these sources and resources to make sense. So especially in Jerusalem, but not only, the sort of the queer Beit Midrash, right? The queer learning, the Orthodox queer learning is a happening scene, right? The other strategies that they were employing, they built bridges. And I think that, Linda, you talked about this with regards to Eshel and what it's been doing in the US. They were building these kinds of bridges with rabbis, with community leaders in Israel, very strategically and very, very smartly, knowing that building those bridges, expanding the network of allies would help not only articulate sort of authentic queer Orthodox queer identities, but also help communicate that to communities at large. The other thing I want to say, and this will kind of link back to the movie, is like the amount of activism that people do was astounding. But it was both big, out in the streets, pride parades, talking to rabbis, being visible on Facebook, but also in their own communities. A lot of people said, hey, my activism is going to shul, right, to my local synagogue with my same-sex partner and our children. That's my activism right there. That's that's how I'm changing the world.
So life as it is lived in a daily way, both holding on to both identities, is how is how sometimes change happens quietly, but really effectively. I'd like to introduce Dani Rosenkrantz, who is a licensed psychologist and the owner of Brave Space Psychology, which is a virtual private practice in Florida. Dani works with LGBTQ Jewish clients, working with them to help in issues of mental health and self-acceptance. And she is with us this afternoon to help us understand how the local Florida community struggles to kind of address the challenges of LGBTQ identity, and particularly in the more conservative religious frames, which she is very aware of. Thank you so much for being with us, Dani. I'd like to first, if you don't mind, for you to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do, and then, if you can, to respond to how you assess the significance or what touched you most about this film that you just saw.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. I am just really grateful to be here and connecting to this important work. So as you mentioned, I'm a licensed psychologist. My name is Dr. Dani Rosenkrantz. I use she, they pronouns. And some of my favorite things to do is really work with Jewish and LGBTQI plus folks in feeling more empowered in affirming their identities, and also create a space to really validate and provide support and resources to help with some of the complex things we're facing, particularly in Florida, in this political climate. Can be very, very challenging for LGBTQIA plus folks. And one of the other pieces of my work that really drew me to this film as well is that I do a lot of work with families. And so parental acceptance is a big part of the research that I did in my graduate training to be a psychologist. But I also do a lot of work with communities, and I even am a part of a grandparent support group right now for affirming trans and non-binary grandchildren. So really trying to help our community learn to be a support. And very much like you're naming, the climate in Florida has added an additional layer. I think any state that is non-affirming, the complexities of being a religious, spiritual person, combined with the climate in a non-affirming environment, combined with just navigating who we are as LGBTQIA plus folks or families who love LGBTQIA plus folks, it's a lot. I talk a lot about minority stress in my work, and I think that's really what spoke to me in this piece, is like folks navigating the minority stress experience of trying to live authentically. And for them, in these multiple stories, we see people just trying to live authentically as themselves, as like Jewish people who practice and engage in ritual in these deeply meaningful ways, that's core to who they are, and they want to be able to live authentically as LGBTQ people, and they don't want to have to choose. And in the work I've done, that is so prevalent, that feeling of pressure to have to choose. And so I found it's so powerful to hear so many different voices say, in different facets of life, from dating to having a family to having a baby, like all these different pieces of just, this is mine, and it's fully mine as me, not as a portion of me where I am siloing off a piece of myself, but I am bringing my full Jewish queer self and creating a beautiful Jewish queer life. And in this context, and that involves engaging in ritual and practice in a way that's authentic to these folks. So I think it's a really powerful story.
Was there a particular scene or a set of characters that you felt you were particularly moved by?
There was one particular scene between, it was in the segment about family, and where the sisters were speaking.
Yes.
And that was one that really stood out to me, this conversation around like, well, I could accept you, the community could accept you, but what about God? I don't know. What's that gonna look like? And I just thought it was so beautiful the way that was challenged, to say, but like, how do you know? How do you know that I'm not enough for God? So that was one that really moved me. I also just thought the journey of watching this trans human navigate parenthood, and in the context of family, and that mom saying, I want you to be connected to God. like that's so deeply important to me. And it's just a lot of really beautiful connecting moments, seeing these people just try to support each other and navigate. And I think that's one of the challenges people have, is sometimes they really struggle with feeling fully supported. And that's why an organization like Eshel is so important, is to help people combat that loneliness and isolation. But there is so much opportunity to, if we can connect, we can. There was one piece too where when the wives were talking about, did you expect this life that we've created? Did you expect this? And just talking about how, like, no, this, like, basically was beyond like my wildest dreams to expect this life we've created, but they did it. And that they found this community where they could build this beautiful Orthodox practice in a family with two moms. And I think that's just really, really amazing to see. And I think it speaks to the potential in our communities.
Well, one of the interesting facets that we mentioned already is that there are no rabbis in this film. There are few communal settings that, indeed, this is an Israeli story that is focused on families primarily. There's some institutional frames. I think it was really interesting to see how the Mohel in the Sephardi, with the Sephardi couple, was present along with family members. But generally speaking, you're looking at a kind of Israeli frame for Jewish identity, which might be less connected to synagogue life. We're here in the US. One of the challenges is Orthodox life is so tied up with synagogue life. And synagogue life is, at least here in Florida, it's very challenging to find a space that's fully accepting in more traditional spaces. If you were to, I'm sure you've dealt with Orthodox families who are struggling. Does this come up as a kind of a sense of sadness that even if their kid decided to remain connected, there'd be very few, if any, frameworks for them to live them out?
That's a really important question. I think, the reality is, Orthodox or not, I think we see parents grappling with that question. What's my child's life going to look like? Are they going to be lonely? Are they going to be single forever? Are they going to have a family that I dream of for them? It's going to be a really hard, like, what is this going to look like? Right. And I think that anxiety is very real, and only further impacted by the current situation that we're in states like Florida, where parents have a real reason to be worried, because it is a scary situation. And at the same time, I think one of the things that really gives me a lot of hope and is seeing the power of community coming together. So I talk a lot to parents and grandparents about, like, I see the fear, and I think what you don't always see is the opportunity for joy and connection, and how powerful building a community where these folks can feel seen can be. And maybe in a certain place in Florida, that feels really hard, and it feels like you have to start small. But I think one of the powerful things about virtual worlds now is also that we have the opportunity to connect much larger. I know I worked at with Jewish queer youth for a while last year, and we ran support spaces for Jewish LGBTQ young people, and we were meeting from all over the world. I mean, people were coming in from different spaces, and these were young people who were very much like these stories, committed to their faith and committed to their identities and building community and just being with each other. And I think the same is possible for parents. In the grandparent support group that I run, grandparents are coming from all different spaces, different aspects of the Jewish community even, and they're coming up and showing up and realizing we're not alone. It can feel like you're really alone when you only look just around you. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I often talk also about how with Jewish identity, I think non-Jewish people might look at us and say, well, that looks really scary. Maybe don't do it so much, or maybe don't be so loud about it or proud about it. But I think for many of us Jews, especially in moments like right now, we think a lot about, well, how do I connect to my Jewish experience right now? And I've seen people say, I'm wearing my Jewish star in public, I'm putting my menorah out for Hanukkah, doing these things that say I'm proud and I want to be in community and go to communal spaces. And I don't think it's so different that to say, you know, these things can be married together, and we can build communities where we can fully feel accepted and seen. But it takes effort and work for sure.
Right. You know, Eshel's been working in this area for about 13 years, and we have a national retreat that's coming up actually in January that is very overlapping the film festival for LGBTQ Orthodox individuals of all ages. But then we have in March a parents retreat, and we have nearly 100 parents who come together, Orthodox parents of LGBTQ kids, to support each other. And they've created a community of real love and in a way, an extended family that is remarkable. And it's virtual most of the year, but on, you know, in one Shabbaton, it's incredible what can happen. So if anyone knows a parent that needs that kind of support, know that you can be in touch with Eshel, info@eshelonline.org. And you can see if you can find a space at in our extended family at the Eshel Parents Retreat. You should also know that part of what this work is recognizing that while you can be fearful of the outcome of your kid coming out and of your coming out as a parent with a queer kid, it turns out that what you rarely know in advance is how much support you're going to get. You always fantasize the wave coming, you know, at you, but it's very hard to imagine the wave coming behind you, lifting you up. So I want to say that one of the things that this work needs to, you know, remind itself is that as nervous and as uncomfortable as it might feel, you will get support that you might not ever have imagined getting. And it's important to venture out knowing that that support is actually hidden, but you can reveal it.
That's beautiful.
We're coming to the end, and I wanted to make sure that we both get a couple of questions from each of you for each other. I just wanted to say one thing is that what you did mention, Orit, is really important for us to note, is that just like in Israel, people used to, in their, you know, older people used to leave their small communities and go to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, and they used to go from where they were in Kentucky or, you know, Missouri all the way to New York City or California. Now people are staying, and that is changing the face of this reality, because all kinds of families that ordinarily would have their kid disappear, they're not disappearing, and indeed they're demanding a space at the table, which is exactly how you described those Israelis who are now in their younger years demanding presence in places where they grew up. I think that's really actually a huge difference over the past decade. I just wanted to give Josh a chance to ask your question, Josh, to Linda, if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. Linda, I may have misheard this or not heard this well, but did your daughter's family leave Orthodoxy because how the community had responded to them, or how they anticipated it would respond?
So in this case, she originally really kind of lost because of her divorce, and she felt ostracized already somewhat being divorced, which is, while much more common in the Orthodox community, is still kind of frowned upon. So that was like the first stepping stone to her kind of feeling uncomfortable in the Orthodox community. And then when her son came out as trans, she just, without speaking to anybody, without looking into it, she just said, that's it, they won't accept me, I'm done, I'm out.
Right.
So, you know, I wish she would have spoken to people, but I think she was kind of partly looking for an excuse, and partly she wasn't wrong.
Right. You know,
partly she really wasn't wrong.
No, thank you, Linda. You know, it's a really interesting point, is that Orthodoxy struggles on this continuum of trying to create a sense of shared identity and commitment and passion, which is sometimes really moving, but also very constricting, so that even if you don't fit in a number of different ways, if you're single, if you're divorced, right? If you don't have kids in these environments, it can be extremely uncomfortable, having nothing to do with sexuality or prohibitions in the book of Leviticus. So Orthodox communities are now in some places working against that exact problematic and trying to create spaces that are more tolerant and open-hearted to a broader frame of human experience that could include LGBTQ identities. And I think that's also a shift, that Orthodox communities recognize that they have been very specific on their expectations in ways that have made people feel like they're really not wanted and need to leave. I wanted to just get, Orit asked a question of everybody in the chat. She says, anyone can answer this. Do you feel that you're being visible in your community is helping change some hearts and minds, either individually or collectively? Any of you? Josh?
I want to hear everybody's. I know it's definitely changed some positions individually. Communally, I know that after I transitioned, the shuls that I was ousted from started having speakers come to talk about the question of trans, and what about LGBTQ people? But then the community wouldn't listen to what the speaker said, and they wouldn't follow what the speaker had said. Definitely on a personal level, there have been people who have been making strides, and now people that end up having a queer family member, or maybe a queer child, have been reaching out to me quietly. Can you help? Can you provide support? And there are people that are coming out in the community younger, and their families who are still in that community are not going to be ostracized. They're not going to allow themselves to be pushed out. And I think that's because we are out.
Daniel?
Yeah, I agree. I think with something that Orit also said, that our greatest activism is just living, because I think just when we live harmoniously with our kids, with my husband, around other people, not being ashamed, being out and about, not hiding, that makes a tremendous difference. And it starts even from the nucleus of, let's say, of the family, let's say from my parents' original resistance, seeing me out of my shell, seeing me happy, seeing me thriving, to eventually, as the circle expands to other parts of the family, to other people in the community. I think that's very, very powerful, that people realize that, this is meant to be. You cannot really go against. We cannot go against people's living authentic lives, and it shows to the point that even my child, a few years after the divorce and me remarrying and living this life. One time we were on vacation, we were walking in the beach, and it says like Tati, Dad, you smile so much more now. We could see you are happier. We could see you're we are doing better. So it really really transcends, and I think it really shows. And I think this is the most powerful message at the end of the day: living authentic lives, conciliating that all the different parts of our lives, and living authentically. It makes such a difference, and that speaks louder than anything. Too bad, like people mentioned, that many communities don't give us the space to be present there, or to be present there, we need to hide. But every day that we continue to move forward, live our lives, live authentically, the doors open. We see doors opening over the years, and I think that's the way we need to continue going.
Thank you, Daniel. That sounds to me like the best wrap up I could imagine. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to just end with one thought to kind of expand something that Orit said. When Shira Banki was killed at, I think it was 2016, at the maybe it was a little later. Maybe I can't remember. Do you remember what year it was?
2015. It was 2015, actually.
It was 2015. So I was there, and I remember that the following one of the following days, Benny Lau spoke at Kikar Tzion, and Benny Lau is an Orthodox rabbi in Jerusalem, who was related to the chief rabbi. It's a cousin of the present chief rabbi of Israel. And he got up and he said, Aron humavet, the closet, Aron is the word for closet, is death. Because the word Aron in Hebrew also means casket. So it means closet and it means casket. And he said to force people to stay in the closet is a death sentence. And here's an Orthodox rabbi taking responsibility. He said, our hands have not spilled this blood is something we can't say. Orthodox life in Israel has shaped the possibility of this murder, and it's because we impose people to stay in a closet, and the closet is death. The description of this film in English is holy closet. In Hebrew, it's Aron, it's the same word, Aron HaKodesh, the holy closet, transforming what it was a casket into a frame of sanctity that is opening. Is an incredible image of what this film is doing, transforming people's opportunities for a real full and joyous and poignant and funny and loving life that is still, fully self-aware and self-accepting as gay or as trans. And so with that, we thank everybody from the Film Festival, Miami Film Festival. Thank you, Igor. Thank you, Douglas. Thank you, everybody at the Miami Jewish Film Festival. And thank all of our panelists for this marvelous opportunity to share some thoughts after Holy Closet. Have a good evening. Take care.